Well, hello, besties. Happy Monday. Happy Transit Chat Day. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I see y'all pulling up right on time. Pew, 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 pew. Had a little extra time going on the intro because I just got out the shower. Start y'all off with some personal updates. But first, let me see who's in the chat with me today after I clean my glasses off. I'm lightly caffeinated, so if I just start sounding cracked out, that's why. Y'all know your boy is caffeine sensitive. Did I have a crumping phase we're aware of? No. No crumping phase. Not that I'm aware of. I don't think that's what was going on. How are y'all today? How are y'all today? It is rainy here in Austin, Texas. But I have had a busy morning. I've been going to bed early, which means I've been waking up early and going to the gym because I've decided that to survive this Mars retrograde in Cancer, I need to be at the gym frequently. So I went 4 times last week and did a long, like 5-6 mile hike with a friend. Got in 16,000 steps and then hit the gym again this morning. So this is where we are. I'm trying to be swole by next summer, okay? Swole with the 6-pack. So that's what's up. Hi, welcome, welcome, welcome. Hey Desiree. Deb, I will see you on the replay. Olivia, good morning. No particular question, just wondering if I'll touch on Pluto. Probably not. I forgot that I was going to touch on Pluto. I was trying to remember what I said I would talk about on Friday or Thursday, and then I didn't end up going live on Friday or Thursday, so I forgot what I was supposed to talk about. I will write that down so that I can remember to talk about it later. Kratos, hello, good afternoon, good noonish. Yeah, no crumping phase. I just was feeling the beat. Welcome, Sherry. Good evening in South Africa. Yes. Any thoughts on this upcoming Mercury retrograde? I will be talking about that today a little bit. I have thoughts and feelings. Robin, hello. Welcome back. Good to see you. Desiree is also caffeinated and spent way too much time at the grocery store wandering around aimlessly. You know what? That used to be one of my favorite pastimes pre-pandemic. Those were the vibes. Now it just makes me anxious to be in there. Plus, I'm poor, so spending money at the grocery store feels a bit demoralizing, but you know, we do what we got to do. Your facial hair looks great. Thank you for noticing. So I am working on it actively. I got a trans-owned beard growth kit for the T-boys, meaning it's DHT friendly. DHT is what helps you grow facial hair, but also makes you lose hair on the top of your head. But I am working on a beard. So this side's going a little bit better than this side. You can't really tell because I have adjustments on, but I am working on it. So we're going to see how it turns out in a few months. Okay. Mitsa, hello. Good to see you as well. Yes, welcome, friends. So before I jump into the astrology, a couple of personal updates. I am on Blue Sky. I'm not officially leaving Twitter yet. I don't know if I will officially leave Twitter ever, but I am currently taking a break just to actually like spend some time on Blue Sky and figure out what that app is actually meant to do. Because as much as we think it's supposed to be a Twitter replacement, it's got its own thing going on. So I am kind of learning the lay of the land, building up a following over there and figuring out what that app actually is. And then I will let you know if I decide to influence and recruit you all to join me over there. But if you are on Blue Sky, I am there. Same handle, Mixed Mercury. Follow me. What else was I gonna say? Yeah, so I got this book from Emilia sent me this book, Thinking About Me. It is called We Both Laughed in Pleasure, The Selected Diaries of Lou Sullivan. This is written by a trans man. I think it was a white trans man, not sure, but it was written by a trans man. It is just a collection of his diary entries throughout his life. And as you can see on the date here, these dates are Saturn in Capricorn and Saturn in Aquarius related dates, eras. So it's very interesting from that perspective. But there was a passage in here in the like beginning parts by the people who wrote the book. And I wanted to see if I could find this one part because I thought some other trans and gender nonconforming people might want to hear this. I should have bookmarked it though. It was in the editor's note. Let me look and see where it is. Is it in the beginning? Try not to spend too much time looking for it. Or was it in the very beginning? It was very Saturn and Aquarius vibes. Oh my god, I'm so jittery I can't even turn the pages. Okay, so he was talking about his own relationship to his gender. And he says something about like whenever he was 13 years old, he wrote, I want to look like what I am, but I want to look like what I am, but don't know what someone like me looks like. I mean, when people look at me, I want them to think there's one of those people that has their own interpretation of happiness. That's what I am. And the rest of the passage says, those words have stayed with me for decades, and in the intervening years, I have still found no better way of expressing what it means to be trans. I see them in the suggestion that we are primarily our own interpretation of happiness, and only secondarily the men or women we were assigned to be or the people that we became. So I thought that was nice. I thought that was very Saturn and Aquarius. I thought that was very insightful. People wanting to be and present as their own interpretation of happiness. So I want to take that with me out into the world. There was also another passage. I'll just read this one too while we're here. That says Sullivan, who is the trans man whose journals we're reading, he said, or the author says, I would go so far as to say, Sullivan, I would go so far as to say, offers essentially the same insight into being trans as that offered by the psychoanalytic theorist Jacques Lacan. Lacan considered transsexuality to represent what he called being a synthome, which is a uniquely personal, idiosyncratic manner of braiding together the psychical registers of the imaginary, the inner realm of images, and the identifications we attach to them. It's also the symbolic, which is the social realm of language and representation, and the real, that which is whether one wishes it to be or not to be, which is very Saturn, right? Like this idea that there are three aspects of reality, and it includes like your inner reality, a material reality, and a social reality represented by language and by representation. And then, yeah, they say more things that are complicated. So I just wanted to share that. Thought that would be interesting for anybody who has a self, which is all of us. And as I've mentioned before, Saturn in Aquarius to me does represent the concept of the self or the conceptual self, the self that we imagine ourselves to be, and also who we imagine ourselves to be in this iteration of reality from our own individual unique perspective. So I will let y'all know more about that book as I get into it. It just kind of what my synopsis of it is. But yeah, the invitation that Emilia basically wrote to me about this book that I also thought was really sweet on this little note says, hopefully, here's some comfort and inspiration from another trans man's journey of coming alive from a past Saturn in Aquarius Capricorn transit onwards. Old worlds are falling apart, and you belong in the new one being built. So I also extend that message to all of you. We all belong in the new world being built. And even though it's going to be a pain in the ass to build it, I think we should stay the course. We should continue to love each other and lift each other up and carry each other along because it's going to be a very long, arduous journey. But I'll do it if y'all will do it. Let me see what y'all are saying in the chat. Also, thank you for letting me share that and for listening. Hello, Sam. Welcome, welcome. That quote just made me so emotional. I know. Yeah. When I read it, I was like, wow. Very current, very timely quote. Very cool. Yes, indeed. Hey, Karen. Karen says, "What the heck is happening in the universe? This weekend has been incredibly chaotic, heavy, and emotional. Hope you're feeling okay." Absolutely, absolutely chaotic times. We will be talking about it today. No worries. Such sweet encouragement. Thank you for extending that to us as well. Yes, yes. I love to hear it. Loved to hear it myself and wanted you all to hear it as well, for sure. How beautiful. I know, right? Real tears. It's hard to imagine a new world with the circumstances we're currently in. And you know what? That is a great jumping off point into the transits for the week, because this is exactly what the fuck time it is right now. And there are reasons. It is incredibly hard to imagine a new world with the circumstances we're currently in. And something I think would be interesting for us to think about is like the civil rights movement, the civil rights movement, which would have also been the late 60s, 1960s, one of the times that Saturn was also in Aquarius, and people were dealing with things like heavy systemic oppression, Jim Crow laws, and things like that. And I'm almost certain that they also probably felt like it was hard to imagine a new world with the circumstances that they were in. I'm also just thinking about way back slave days, like being brought over here on the roughest waters, traversing across the Atlantic, landing here against your will, and being forced to basically survive the conditions that existed all the way up to the Underground Railroad times and the Emancipation Proclamation. And of course, I'm speaking from a Black perspective, but our people have survived a lot against the odds and didn't have nearly as much access to information or technology that we have today, have had very little access to each other, unless it was people in their immediate direct communities, like no access to information or communication with people and even in the next town over, unless you wanted to make a very long effort to do so, um, in just the harshest circumstances. And so while yes, like suffering is relative and what we're experiencing today is unique to us, and therefore, there's a lot of unknown and a lot of uncertainty around how we get through this. I think something that keeps me going, at least, is remembering that people have survived worse. A lot of people did not survive worse, but a lot of people have survived worse. And we are the outcome of the people who did survive. So I think that's really cool. And kind of going back to this conversation about information and imagining new worlds and things like that. Today, one of the big transits that is the first of three is Mercury in Scorpio opposite Jupiter in Taurus, which is currently retrograde. We will have 3 Mercury-Jupiter oppositions over the next couple of months while Mercury is retrograding and while Jupiter is still retrograde. This is the first one while Mercury is still moving forward, soon to slow down. And I've been thinking about this transit all year as big on the information wars, but also big on the culture wars, for lack of a better way to put it. And something about it and its connection to the North and South nodes that are in Pisces and Virgo, a lot of it has to do with, like, obviously disinformation, misinformation, and propaganda. But there's a cultural aspect of it where, like, the way that we're being challenged to communicate and identify with each other is shifting. I think, especially post-election, which, I mean, we're post-election, we're in this weird election interim where there's still much to be seen before actual inauguration day in January. But in this weird, like, post-election limbo space, there's a lot of conversation about what is true and what is real. Hey, Samaje. A lot of conversation about, like, real news versus fake news. There's a lot of people kind of reacting to what's going on and making decisions based on their emotional reactions. And just a lot of conversation about, like, what are we going to do? How are we going to protect each other? And also, how do we discern who is and who isn't a threat to us? And there's even some conversation around how to, like, unbrainwash people. even though we know that more brainwashing is on the way. And I just happened to see 2 TikToks before I got on live that kind of made me really start thinking about this Mercury Jupiter opposition, and seeing Jupiter in the context of this particular conversation as culture, like Jupiter in general representing culture, and then Jupiter and Taurus specifically representing like standards, cultural standards or cultural expectations that we have of ourselves and of each other, and how so much of that is based on, in capitalism, class and access, whether that's access to information, like we spoke about, education, uh, religion and spirituality, social media tools, whatever it is. I'm sticking with culture, standards, and access for Jupiter and Taurus today, and how, depending on what you have access to, that's going to shape the way that you see and experience and understand or make meaning out of what's going on politically and socially. And since Taurus is about belonging and sticking together and togetherness in a general sense, like uniting, there's a conflict or maybe some kind of a struggle, power struggle of sorts between Jupiter and Mercury. So, where Jupiter is the context, Mercury is the conversation, it's the information, the content that you can interpret depending on whatever your personal context is. So that's how like words mean different things to different people, or how words mean different things depending on what it is that you're talking about. We understand things differently. And Mercury in Scorpio is speaking about, yes, our differences and our like biological and physical differences, but there's also something about like alienated because of what you don't have access to, or being separated from other people because you're trying to protect yourself. And I also apologize. I see that my internet connection is a little fuzzy, so if I if I die, I apologize. But yeah, there's something about identity and personhood being a barrier to access, which we know this in general. One way that this is kind of manifesting or has been building up for the last probably 30 or 40 years, and I'm referencing the TikTok that I saw earlier, is there's been like an intentional effort to, as this creator put it, demoralize people, which means kind of taking them out of the understanding that they've had previously of what the world is and how the world works, and to just introduce a bunch of noise and a bunch of chaos and a bunch of like unrealistic opposing viewpoints, so that we've reached a point where nobody knows what's real, but also nobody knows what's fake. And so it's really hard, because so much of this has been like an emotional manipulation. It's been really hard to get people to think differently, or to basically be receptive and open to new information. People have become very locked into their understanding or their version of reality, rather than having like a collective consensus about what reality is, what's real, what's true, especially. So this opposition, and I'm thinking through this in real time, but this opposition represents something about that, something about the ways that people have a different understanding and different perspective about what's real and what's true, based on the person, the individual person that they are, and their individual perspective based on their identity, especially based on their class and based on their access to culture and information. So we've reached this point where, Trump allegedly has won a second election during a time where a lot of people are very rigid in their thinking, and also where people are emotionally susceptible to manipulation. And another manifestation of this is like the Twitter exodus that's happening right now, the like massive X or Twitter exodus of people leaving Twitter and seeking out other social media sites, Blue Sky being one of them, in an effort to get away from these massive propaganda campaigns. Where, as much as like we think we aren't internalizing these things, or that we're not being affected by it because we're so kind of numbed out by it at this point, since Elon's been owning the app for the last couple of years, it's easy to feel like we've tuned it out. We're not paying attention to it. We know what's real and what isn't. But I think there is like a subconscious or unconscious way that we are internalizing that information and don't realize it. And not that we necessarily have to agree with it or believe it, but I think on some level we think that maybe these are bigger, more, I don't know, more common ideals than they actually are. And I'm not saying that people aren't jumping on board with it, because obviously, like, if that many people can vote for Trump, some of it's working, but it's bigger than Trump. Like, fascism is bigger than Trump. Trump is kind of just like the placeholder, or like the projection screen that we're projecting fascism onto. He's a representation of it, but he's not all of fascism. Fascism's been around longer than him and all of these people in office. But because he has the power, he has the outlets, he has billionaires on his side of whom fascism benefits, they're all kind of getting on board and inserting these very old traditional right-wing values and culture and standards back into the collective consciousness, so that people kind of revert to these old, again, like Jim Crow era style of living and white supremacy and like industrial age kind of mindsets. A lot of this, I think, also has to do with the fact that they're trying to manufacture consent for war, another world war. I don't know if it's going to look the same as wars have looked in the past, or if it's going to be mostly proxy wars, or if it's going to be mostly information, cyber wars, and hacking and stuff like that. I don't know. But that feels like a threat that's looming. And so before really getting into the war, similar to like they did in the early, I can't remember what decade that was, but the kind of World War II era, I think. Whenever the Red Scare was, there was a lot of propaganda going on around that time too, because nationalism is really important during war times. And nationalism is really important, and like getting the country to be more American, for lack of a better way to put it, so that everybody else is an enemy, instead of seeing us as a global collective that we all have to survive, global threats, common threats in a big way. So I'm in a super zoomed out perspective as I speak about this, but what this means for me and you as regular everyday people is that I think they're manufacturing even more divides and even more polarization based on what people would call identity politics, or really identity, what's it called? Identity, not oversimplification, but identity reductionism, as a way to keep us, again, seeing each other as enemies versus actually recognizing that all of us are threatened under fascism. So I'll pause there because I feel like I just said a lot and I need that information to reorient in my brain, but I want to see what you guys are saying. Adaria says, "Isn't this the perfect time to reimagine things anew? Because what other choice is there with what we've got? Like stay or evolve." Exactly. Like the challenge of Saturn and Aquarius is really kicking in now and will kind of set the stage for the nodes moving into Aquarius and Leo next year. And you know how eclipses are. Eclipses are like massive shakeups and massive progressions forward into like evolving into new ways of being and existing. Where it's happening right now with this information struggle that we're having between Pisces and Virgo. Saturn and Aquarius is setting the stage for eclipses in Aquarius and Leo that's going to have us dealing with authority, basically. Authority figures, systems of authority, systems of power, and systems of oppression. And so the reason that Saturn and Aquarius, which is now direct, by the way, and this idea of like reimagining things despite what we know is coming feels really difficult. Jada mentioned this, is because we're not really immersed in evidence of the contrary. Like the whole point of Saturn and Aquarius on the negative end is to erase and to make it seem like things are impossible or not possible because we haven't seen it done before. But whenever it comes to fascism, whenever it comes to colonialism in general, their whole purpose, and the whiteness in general, not as a race, but as a kind of social construct, is to erase, to get rid of what has been previously, so that we have no reference point and therefore have nothing to invest in or to continue to create and build upon. But the information is out there. We just have to look for it. And one thing that Jada mentioned to me recently that has been giving her hope is that she's been reading books about, anti-fascist, black anti-fascists specifically, reviewing Black Panther's information, reading more about people in the past who have achieved some form of liberation, even though it's not completely free from capitalism. But their version of liberation at the time was to have access to capital and capitalism, which we kind of have to see that for what it is. It did give people more freedom to some extent, at least economic freedom within the system. What we're trying to do now, I think, is imagine something larger outside of capitalism, which feels impossible because all we've known is capitalism. But the difference for this generation, the kind of millennial baby Gen X generation, is technology and information access. Like, we have so much more access to information that I've joked in the past that like free speech in the US is kind of a trap because anybody can say anything, which is nice because you can speak up against the things that are happening, but also anybody can say anything, which means conspiracy theorists and people who don't have our best interest in mind and who want to bring back, fascism in ways that we haven't understood can also do that and kind of introduce it into public consciousness in a way that maybe we wouldn't think about before. And that also contributes to the whole erasure self-determination battle that we're having with Saturn and Aquarius. So it's very complicated. But I think the struggle that we're having is, like I said, we don't know what liberation looks like in the information age, in the technology age. We don't know what liberation looks like whenever we're being constantly inundated with the latest and greatest news and technology and whatever it is. So I think something we have to consider is that what would liberation look like materially in today's context, not necessarily the context of the past? And then what are ways that have worked maybe socially in the past that we need to either reimagine or that we need to um, restructure in a way that is consistent with the current times? So I don't know what that looks like, but I think part of what this opposition is challenging us to do is, one, learn how to talk to each other again, but also learn how to recognize what is enemy conversation in a way and what is friendly conversation. And what I mean by that is like what is propaganda and what isn't. What is conspiracy in the literal sense that, like, yes, there are real conspiracies that exist and that are working against us, and what is conspiracy theory meant to kind of drive all of us into more isolation, into more isolation and individual isolation to where we don't trust anything. Because just as much as like there's naivety in trusting everything, there's also, I don't know if it would be called naivety, but there's also like limits to not trusting anything. And I think one of the struggles with Saturn in Pisces next year and then the next 3 years is the struggle to trust anything. Like, there's a lot of not believing anything, not trusting anything, and not having any real foundations, especially emotional and spiritual foundations, with Saturn and Pisces that can feel limiting or that can limit our experience of our own emotional reality if we just choose not to believe anything. So I guess Jupiter and Taurus is also, when I talk about standards, setting a foundation for us to cultivate or to imagine or to decide what our standards, our social standards, are going to be, despite everything that we're being told and all the propaganda being fed to us of how we should act and how we should treat each other, whether that's explicit or implicit. So it's a very heavy task. All of that to say, I feel like I'm talking in the ethers, but it's a very heavy task to get us all to the point where words mean the same things to us and we all have the same expectations of each other despite how we have to survive. You know what I mean? And there's also something about like the judgments that we have and project onto each other about like not being radical enough or not being, woke enough or not being whatever it is enough to be with the movement. Like, we all have to have or we all have to contribute in ways that are unique to us and what we are capable of and what we have the capacity for. And we can't spend too much time getting bogged down shaming each other or separating ourselves from each other because someone is not doing activation act, activism or liberation exactly the way, or revolution exactly the way that we imagine it and that we want it to happen. We just need to all have a common goal, a common standard, a common way of living and treating each other that we stand by, and then kind of move from that place. Everybody can branch off and do their respective goals or their respective tasks or whatever it is in service of the larger movement. So, yeah. I feel like I'm deep in my bag. So Samaj asked, why are people jumping ship all of a sudden? People are leaving X because, well, I think people are leaving X ultimately because Elon is now in a position of power, even if it's fake power, or whatever manufactured power. He's in a position of power that's directly attached and affiliated with the government. And, not necessarily that it's a form of protest, I wouldn't say, but I think people are just kind of fed up. There's that. There's also stuff with the terms of service that just changed a few days ago. There are a number of reasons why people are leaving, but the mass exodus, I believe, has to do both with him being in bed with Trump, basically, and also the terms of service change. Like, people just wanted to leave, and then some people are also just kind of following the herd because they needed an excuse to leave. I'll say for me, part of the reason that I have at least moved over to Blue Sky is because the propaganda machine on X, on Twitter, is like so heavy, and the way the algorithm is set up, the way that there's harassment campaigns set up, like there's just so much noise and kind of emotional violence and manipulation happening on Twitter that it reminds me of being in an abusive relationship. And people have said this before, I'm not the first person to say it, but it really does feel like um being like in a trauma bond, like the actual definition of trauma bond with an abusive relationship where you can't get out of it even though you know it's bad for you. And I've definitely been very stubborn to leave Twitter, but I made a point to stay off of Twitter and just experience Blue Sky. And like, people are kind of shitting on it being like positivity and leftist, or not leftist, but liberal echo chamber and all this other stuff. But I think I think we should all maybe consider that we are so used to abuse that we've normalized it even for ourselves, that we kind of just have to tolerate it because of some larger moral purpose, or I don't know. It kind of makes me feel like the badge of honor of suffering that doesn't actually exist, but we've gotten so used to suffering that we just don't know anything different. And then we kind of like shit on other things that are kind of positive as like not being realistic or not being authentic or being intolerant of anger and discomfort. And I don't necessarily think that's the case. I do think there are some people who feel that way. They want Blue Sky to just be like rainbows and butterflies, no pun intended, but for me, not having right-wing propaganda in my face every 2 seconds while I'm scrolling has made a marked change in my mental health incapacity. Like, I'll just be real. I didn't think I would say that. I didn't think I would feel that way, but it is different. And I think, it doesn't have to be the only app that you use, but if it does becoming a popular rival to X even more than like Threads or these other social medias have been, I think it's worth it to just have the experience while it lasts of being in a more positive, uplifting social environment where your tweets aren't being suppressed unless you pay for a check mark, where your algorithm isn't like constantly rage baiting you, where you're not just in this constant negative, toxic environment. Because honestly, X is a negative and toxic environment. All of the people that I love, my audience that I've been curating for years and years and years is on there. So I'm not jumping ship that quickly, but I think to have something to balance it out so that there's a little bit more just like cognitive freedom, that's kind of like one form to me of a space that would allow you to imagine something different, especially because you have to learn how to use a new app and not just like recreate the same thing that we've been doing on Twitter. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in it personally that I'm trying to figure out what exactly that is for me. But, I encourage everybody to just try something different to get us out of the hellscape mindset, the very like aggressive interaction mindset and very like self-protective mindset that I think X/Twitter has put all of us in. So that's my thought about it. Let me see what y'all are saying. This feels so familiar to all the times folks shifted to the next social app. Curiosity, Twitter is dead and X is a terrible app by now, seeking spaces with shared values. Yes, exactly. And hi, Jim. Welcome, welcome. Yeah, I think just having, because I get it, right? Like, there's a lot of resistance around trying something new, especially when we've been trying to make fetch happen in all these other ways and it's just not happened. People always end up going back to the devil that we know. And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think it's important to have something just as good, if not better, in addition to it, so that we have multiple avenues and not just the one that has been overtaken by fascist overlords. Eventually, all of the apps are going to be owned by billionaires or whoever, because those are the people in the technological space with the money. But I'm going to read up more on Blue Sky and just this idea of like a decentralized app and what that actually means and how to actually use it, and then see where that takes us. Because I do think there could be a use for it that doesn't have us directly under Elon Musk's thumb. I just feel like that's important in this particular context of him being part of the government now in a significant way. As soon as folks have another option and there's enough shared consensus, they'll jump ship. Exactly. Same thing, like having a standard of this is how we want to interact with each other. Let's not keep feeding into the rage bait machine. I'm appreciating the direction of this convo. Been thinking about these points a lot this month. Excellent. I'm glad. Glad I'm speaking to everybody's consciousness. Tolerance of intolerance. Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. All I know is cap. I need access to different systems of functioning for our world so I can dream and reimagine. Absolutely. Yeah, identity reductionism is what I was thinking. This right now is unacceptable regarding what standards we are okay with moving forward. Yeah, like, because there's no fucking reason that after the election we should have black people, especially black women, coming on Twitter and being like, fuck it, let's all go to Starbucks. I hope that your families get bombed. Like, what are you saying? What are you saying? Just go right back to Starbucks, even if they weren't related to Palestine. The original reason people were boycotting Starbucks is because they union bust, because they are anti-people, they are anti-employee, they are anti-workers' rights. Like, this is part of the liberation movement. And then everybody just goes back to be like, oh, okay, let's just like drink our Starbucks so we can own the libs. Like, please get it together. Get it together, baby. Starbucks is not your friend. Olivia agrees, also just needed an excuse to leave. I also finally needed a space to leave, and we've been socialized to accept abuse on so many levels. That's the hill that I'm willing to die on. Like, to just see so many people be like, no, you're abandoning us. Like, I get it. I get it. I felt that way. I do feel that way sometimes whenever there are people who are like, I probably just will get off of the apps. I'm like, you can't get off the apps. How else will we connect? Like, connecting with people who aren't just in our immediate vicinity, to me, is something that we need to really prioritize, because I have a feeling if we don't prioritize it, if we don't advocate for it, we will lose it, and that would be bad. Like, yes, get to know your neighbors and get involved with your immediate community, get involved with the people around you. But I also think we still have to make like this technology we have to communicate with each other around the world. We need to keep that, because that's how we keep from being in an American bubble where we already have a complex of only knowing what's going on with us and not the rest of the world. Like, we need to maintain access to Palestine. We need access to Sudan. We need access to other places around the world that are having experiences that we are directly contributing to, and to actually get the truth and not just rely on American government to tell us what's going on, because obviously they're fucking lying to us. So, I don't think leaving social media is the answer. I think we need to be very disciplined in how we use social media, and that we have to always remember that we are existing in algorithms and in machines that are trained to both feed us things and also to give us what we are seeking out. So we have to kind of maintain control and autonomy and self-determination over our own algorithms as well. So not engaging in rage bait, but engaging in communal conversations and actually talking to each other instead of talking past each other. Hey, Elizabeth. Welcome, welcome. My only issue is there's suppression of Palestinian voices. I hope it gets rectified. Me too. And I think a lot of people are pushing for that. I don't know how that works or what would need to happen, but yes, that definitely needs to happen. Because I think there have also been rumors that it's owned by Zionists, but at this point, everything in the US is owned by Zionists or Zionist sympathizers because fascism and propaganda. Jack Dorsey isn't involved in Blue Sky anymore. It's a public benefit corporation. Yes. Also something to read about as well. There's an article that I was supposed to read that I thought I saved it and I can't find it. But once I find it, I will share it with y'all about the person who owns it now and what the intention of the app is. It's also nice to not be somewhere that functionally sucked so that you're suppressed and so you never see the people you want to talk to. It really is similar to an abusive situation. Absolutely. Divide and conquer. Like, we really have to see it that way because that's what's happening. And if we keep ignoring it because we're stubborn and don't want to leave because, whatever, like, I just think we need to be a little bit more open to other things and just open to, again, a little bit of joy, a little bit of corniness, a little bit of happiness, like, yes. Sherry says, I thought I wasn't going to see anything about Palestine and Sudan on Blue Sky, but I've seen way more than what I've expected. Yes. And that's the other thing too. Like with all of these apps, they become, to some extent, what we make it. Whenever there's not this heavy outside interest trying to make it be something else, we are the people who make it what it is. So if we can pick up Bikini Bottom and move it over here, we can recreate whatever we want to create. It just, we have to get everybody to be on the same page. Again, cultivating a new standard with this Mercury Jupiter opposition. Blue Sky has a young woman CEO, and they've prioritized safety features like mass block lists, detaching quote tweets to prevent swarming, and actual real moderation, which is also true. There are some other nuances to this that people have been talking about recently as well, but still, like, the block function actually works. There are roundabout ways that you can actually see past the block feature, but you have to use a specific website for that. And they're still building it out also. Like the way that we're using it now is not the final product. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Contending with how I want to show up online in the future. Yes. Blue Sky's user interface is so lovely. Yes. Keep your private business off of social media. The tech bros will be giving everything they can to Trump. Yes. Good point. Good point. Thank you for referencing SpongeBob. Yes. Okay. I got like 15 minutes left. What was the other thing I needed to talk about? Oh, this is the main thing. Cool. Yeah. This is the Mercury opposite Jupiter is the main aspect for this week. There aren't other aspects. We just have the moon is in Gemini right now. The moon will be in Cancer tomorrow evening. And then the moon will be in Leo early this Friday. Both of those moon transits, pay attention to those because one, the moon right now is currently opposite Venus, which I think is also speaking to some of these opposing perspectives and beliefs and kind of values, again, relating back to Jupiter and Mercury's opposition. What we believe in and how we share information, what we're teaching, what we're learning, what we're talking about, and things like that, how we're spreading information. A big part of that, and how we are aligned or misaligned on our beliefs. The moon will be conjunct Mars while it's in Cancer. What did I want to say about Mars? Yes, that was the other thing. So Mars in Cancer the more this transit goes on, the more I feel it being related to this idea of like comfort and not necessarily joy, but just like feeling good. I know usually we've talked about Cancer in terms of like numbing and pacifying, which is definitely still the case, especially in a consumer society. But I also think this kind of being related to the weird relationship that it has with Venus in Sagittarius is that like we need, and I'm saying this as a Capricorn, so the sign opposite Cancer. We do need something that feels good in order to kind of give us a little boost, a little dopamine hit, a little serotonin hit in order to want to stay alive. We need like little rewards along the way that make us just feel good about being here. I don't know if y'all have seen the trend across social media that's kind of dark, but it's like people will post something very simple like a bowl of cereal and be like, don't never kill yourself. Or they'll post like, I don't know, somebody eating pizza with their partner while watching cartoons or something. Never kill yourself. Shit like that feels very Mars and Cancer to me, or just like Cancer in general having retrograde in Cancer where people are finding little joys. Um, you know, especially through food and especially through relationships, finding little joys and little boosts of happiness and pleasure as a way to keep going, as a way to not give up, as a way to not kind of wallow in sorrow and grief and pain and agony. I also see this again as like people moving to people moving to blue sky and being like, "Oh my gosh, people are so much happier over here. It feels like nonprofit energy." I like made the joke that they greet you with warm cookies at the door, like shit like that. We need to get back to some shit like that. You know, we need to get back to, like I said, things that are corny, things that are cheesy, like write somebody a fucking love letter, you know? Like write your friends little like thank you notes, or I don't know, send your friend $5 and say, "Hey, go get like, I don't know, a coffee or something, $10, whatever much coffee costs in your area." Little gestures of just like, "Hey, go indulge yourself. I love you. I care about you. I see you. Times are hard. Here, here's a hug." Crack a joke, smile. You know, like we need to feel good somewhere. And again, there's no reward for suffering. We've been so, again, in these toxic, abusive environments of capitalism and individualism that we've forgotten how to just like let go and have fun and like not take things so seriously. I just really feel like we're going to need that for to survive the darkness that is coming upon us. And normally, like, I'm very like, no, don't numb out. Like, you need to be sober. You need to be serious. You need to like lean into your suffering so you're willing to do something to change ourselves. But we don't have the capacity just yet to suffer in a way that leads to resistance. That feels weird to say, but like a lot of us have very little emotional capacity because it's been eroded, systemically eroded for so long that, you know, all we've learned how to do is how to process trauma and like how to grieve and how to feel bad, which was important and is important and something we'll continuously have to do. But something I've been trying to introduce back into like my astrology sessions and coaching sessions while we have Jupiter and Taurus and this long ass Mars retrograde in Cancer transit is to remind people to enjoy things, remind people to do things that feel good, to buy stuffed animals and like squeeze them, you know, sit under your weighted blanket, pet a dog, go to, I don't know, go for a walk with a friend and get coffee, like little things. Um you know, if you have a craving for a freaking pint of ice cream, just go get the pint of ice cream. You know what I mean? Like, give yourself the little boost that just reminds you that everything doesn't suck. And that way, whenever things do suck, you still have the capacity for joy and pleasure, and you can still enjoy things whenever it comes up. And you can feel anger when you need to feel anger, and also feel lightness and feel openness and receptivity to each other whenever you need it. I think a big part of that is Mars and Cancer related as well. So, as much as like, yes, seek out new social media new social media options. Also, like me going to the gym to stay sane and working out more than I would probably normally work out because it feels good and like helps me feel better in my body. So I'm not constantly stuck in a freeze state, you know, or exercising control where you can, which is probably really the crux of Mars and Cancer retrograde. Like, what do you actually have control over in your immediate environment? And how can you utilize that to serve you or to make you feel good or to give you, again, a boost that you need to continue forward to survive what is to come? Because shit's going to suck. It's going to suck. It may or may not be worse than what we can even fathom for most of us in just from our reference point, but we have to hold on to we have to hold on and like viciously be protective of our joy and our pleasure to get through it. Otherwise, yeah, we will just want to die, and that's not fruitful to liberation either. So, small rant. um as an aside, have you thought about doing a mini sidereal astrology 101 situation, or does anyone know someone to follow for a newbie? I haven't, but I can. If people will show up for it, I'm happy to do that. I think the main thing that I'll say for this live about sidereal astrology, Western sidereal astrology, or at least the way that I use it, is that I'm mostly trying to teach people how to think critically or to think outside of really rigid, like memorizing and like regurgitating information, because I think that's an important skill, you know, critical thinking as an important skill moving forward, since we're going to have so much gaslighting, at least in 2025. In order to survive the gaslighting of 2025 and of Jupiter, of Saturn and Pisces, critical thinking is really important. And so a lot of what sidereal astrology is meant to do is kind of give you a different perspective on how to look at things, or to give you new language to describe your experiences, and to also start seeing patterns of like how all of these things are linked, or how these things are showing up around me in the media, in conversations, so on and so forth. And so a lot of the 101 stuff is in my astrotherapy guide. I have a digital version of it in my shop on my website. uh there are a lot of keywords in it, but in terms of like how to actually use astrology, yeah, that's kind of like a hands-on project. So I don't know, maybe I can host some workshops again. I haven't done workshops in a long time. So Sidereal Astro 101 workshops for like a low fee. I'd probably be down for that when I can get my ducks in a row, one day at a time. Love that. Being genuine, reminding yourself that you are human, positive. This, this, this is that's so poignant, because especially with climate change, like people love to say, oh, humans are the virus, humans are the problem, Earth is trying to get rid of humans. Like, I've heard that that's actually a eugenicist talking point, which I think is interesting. But yeah, being human is not a bad thing. Humans are not inherently evil. I don't think humans are inherently evil. In fact, I think we are just neutral, responding to our environment. I do think the prefrontal cortex is a curse, but that's just me. Conscious awareness and foresight and planning ahead feels like a curse, but it is a gift. Um, it is a gift that we all possess, and human minds in general are very plastic. Plasticity, neuroplasticity, the ability to change, um, important. So yeah, reminding yourself that being human is not a bad thing. Humans are not bad. We can be conditioned to be bad, just like anything else. And so we can also be conditioned to be good. Remember that. Preserve that within yourself. Don't give up on your own humanity. Right? Love that. Thank you, Adaria. Wait, no, that's been one of my favorite ones, not sarcastically, because that's exactly how I had to talk to myself years ago when recovering from a major depressive episode. You're so right. I assume you're talking about the like, don't kill yourself thing. I'm not to joke about suicide because ideation is real these days, but just like it gets dark sometimes. And the quickest way I've been able to pull myself and other friends out of the hole is to just like let yourself have something. Like I know for me, I will withhold from myself as the Capricorn I am by like not letting myself indulge and like splurge and spend money that I don't have or run up my credit card or whatever it is. Like again, these are capitalist tools that don't contribute to like degrowth or becoming less consumerist, but at the same time, like while we're trying to survive capitalism, like again, control where you have it. If caring a little bit less, or rather punishing yourself a little bit less for your spending habits in a moment, if that's going to give you enough of a boost to get to the next moment, then you got to do what you got to do. I have a lot less judgment around that now. So sometimes it's okay to just feel nice. You can take that too far. Don't take it too far, right? But within reason, sometimes it's okay to feel nice to get to the next moment. Alice Walker said, hard times require furious dancing, and I agree. The embodied joys are so necessary to keep us going. Dancing is a good one too, because it's also can be kind of cringe if you're not a good dancer or if you're dancing by yourself. And sometimes you just need to be cringe. Turn the music up loud. Too much suffering without relief makes people numb. Exactly. There's no inherent lesson in suffering, which is the problem in that suffering as a badge of honor. Yes, that is something I needed to hear as a Capricorn because it's so true. You get so used to suffering that you don't even feel pain. Like, yeah, you don't feel joy and that things that are supposed to feel good don't feel good, but also things that are supposed to hurt don't hurt. And that's not a good place to be. That's where abuse slips in. We have to maintain our sensitivity. I also think that's part of Mercury retrograde in Scorpio and its tie to Mars and Cancer is that we need to be sensitive, actually. We need to be able to feel all of the spectrum and range of feelings and emotions and to call that shit out whenever we see it and say it as it is, because sometimes we have to be other people's nervous system too. I do think that is a strength of Scorpio and Cancer and Pisces, although Pisces is, well, also involved with via the North Node. Sometimes we have to be other people's nervous system and say like, hey, this shit sucks. And I know you're scared to say it for whatever reason, the risk of alienation and separation from the group, but I know it sucks for you too. And if we could all just admit it, maybe we could do something about it. Sometimes you do need to be in other people's bodies and tell them like, I don't think that feels very good to you. Are you sure? And ask, hold up the mirror. That's another thing that with Saturn and Aquarius as well, we have to be able to reflect each other back to each other. Otherwise, we'll struggle to know who we are, struggle to see ourselves. The performance of being principled at the expense of not being a person that people want to listen to or organize with. T. T. That is T. Ooh, it also feels very relevant to Jupiter and Taurus as the ruler of Venus and Sagittarius. Because it's not just enough to perform your convictions. It's not. It's not enough to just perform your convictions, you know? I think humanity in its messiness, in its nuances, and its contradictions is really, really important. Also because black and white thinking can also drive, again, cult behavior. I've said this before, but also make us more susceptible to propaganda. Because one thing about conspiracy theorists, especially, is that they're very good at using a little bit of truth or a little bit of a nuance and then extrapolating a whole other belief or ideal about something, like RFK Jr. is going to do with public health and vaccines and abortions and everything else, the right in general. Very good at taking little bits of truth and then adding in a whole bunch of other bullshit that's not really true, and people will believe it because they really believe in that one little bit of truth that they've extrapolated. One of the things is red dye 40, right? Something I learned recently. People will be like, oh, red dye 40 is not even legal in like the EU and European nations, which is not actually true. Red dye 40 is legal. It just goes by a different name. They just call it something else. And they have substances that are legal there that aren't legal here. So we can't just like make these sweeping generalizations about this one thing that some subset of people has told us is inherently bad, and that, whenever I go to Europe, I lose 10 pounds and I feel better because all the food's not poison. Maybe some truth to that, yes. And is it possible you also just feel better because you're not in the environment that was full of the emotional stress of working an 8 to 5 job every single day, sitting in traffic for 2 hours, having road rage with other people and a whole family that you have to take care of and your routines and so on and so forth? Like sometimes just, like I say, going to the 12th house to get better perspective on the third house, on the familiar, going to the unfamiliar is stress relief in and of itself. And then, yeah, you might shed a couple pounds because you're not carrying the daily stressors of your regular life. Stuff like that, right? There's some truth to it, yes, but it's not the truth. So getting better at recognizing your own contradictions also helps you to see contradictions in other efforts that are trying to manipulate you, basically. I resent the Democrats co-opting the word joy because of that, because they mean joy in the context of ignoring genocides. Yes, exactly. Because that would be considered numbing and pacifying. This is why I love Sidereal Geminis, my corny, cheesy faves. Period. Exactly. Thanks for being here, Elizabeth. Good to see you. Well, yes, I can be sat for some Sidereal Astro lessons. Period. Going to buy myself a stuffed zebra. Yes. Get a weighted one if that feels good. A squishmallow. Squishmallows are great. Yes, that is what I'm referring to. Being other people's nervous system. Yeah, not super. You have, again, another thing you have to be very disciplined to do. Uh, Not overly attuned, but somewhat aware of how you and other people are feeling. As a heavily water sign woman, I feel I am the people's nervous system. Yeah, absolutely. But that's important, right? Like again, to be able to feel your own feelings and to be sensitive to other people's feelings as well. Of course, within limits or with boundaries. The lesson from Scorpio, but a necessary evil, right? Okay. I think that's all I have for today. I hope I didn't miss anything. I think I pretty much answered everything we were talking about because y'all asked if that's what we were going to be talking about, and it was. So cool. Thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. I hope that this made sense. I hope that you can find some authentic experience of joy this week, especially leading up to the holiday seasons. I know those can be rocky for me and probably rocky for a lot of you. I hope to see you on Blue Sky if it's calling you. And if not, I will see you on Twitter later this week. I'm taking a break, like I said, but I will be back. I'm also going to try to post my Mercury retrograde horoscopes for all of the signs. I hate doing horoscopes. I don't know why I keep doing them. But I will work on that. I will try to work on that at work today if we're not busy. So, okay. That's all. I hope y'all have a wonderful day. Peace and blessings. Thank you so much. Don't forget to like the video if you didn't already. Cue outro music.